What problems does Impact VC solve, and what problems can you not solve in Impact VC?
As Emily said, there are certain issues that should be solved by the government, and certain issues that aren't solved by the government should be solved and actually are effectively solved by the third sector, charities and KICs. And I think where impact venture can be the most effective is where there's an aligned commercial model. So where typically there'll be a market failure somewhere because of inefficiencies, and generally through tech there can be a solving of that market failure. So a concrete example, if you think of the price of a good or service is kind of split out, and if you look at where the inefficiencies can happen, obviously you potentially can't do anything about the kind of raw material cost, the cost of the good in itself. You then have the cost of delivery of the good. Here tech can do a lot of stuff, whether it's AI, whether it's cloud computing, whether it's API technology in various different industries. Whether, in energy, you can now use AI to optimize your energy consumption, for example. In banking, you can completely rethink the way financial services are delivered in a much more transparent, much more cost-effective way. Beyond the cost of delivery, you've got the whole kind of credit area where there's a huge market failure for information in general. Here, tech can solve those market failures very effectively by bringing in data, more accurate data, and kind of reprice and rethink the value chain of those services. And then on top of that, obviously, you've got profit margin. Tech can potentially help make it easier to create mass market products at a lower margin, but with mass distribution. This is where I think you can really start to create innovation in the service of the mass market. And that's how we think about, the different areas in which we invest. Like they solve one point at one point or the other on that value chain, but they always have a scalable commercial business model that goes hand in hand with an intent of creating impact, which is very, very important. That intent from the founder.
And I completely get that. And then there's the split of, as you say, commercial, non-commercial. What falls into the non-commercial part, right? Or what falls into the commercial part in the end?
When you're thinking about, is it a commercial business or is it not a commercial business? It's actually funny because I met Emma when I was co-founder at a business called Tuco, and we were flirting with her, trying to get her to invest in us. And
that was working. It was working.
Yeah. we knew she was interested. Everyone kept telling us we should be a charity. So we were building open banking products for people with cognitive impairments. And the question was, who pays, right? Who is going to pay for this? The person who benefits from it really can't pay for it. They didn't have the capacity to pay for it, or they didn't have the awareness that they ought to pay for it. A family member might have paid for it, but it wasn't really appropriate. And kind of we thought banks should pay for it. Banks were kind of getting away with doing the bare minimum and didn't really see the need to invest hugely in it. And maybe times have changed with consumer duty and other sort of regulatory reforms. But we were really struggling to find who was going to pay. Everybody loved the idea. Everybody wanted to have it. Nobody wanted to pay for it. And you see other models like that. So in the space we operate in, we connect to benefits checkers to help people find their entitlement to state benefits. There's something like £23 billion that go unclaimed each year. Those companies are all delivered as charities. They all operate as charities, even though we pay to deliver the service to our app members at WageStream. The person who's actually the service recipient, they can't pay. There's somebody who is kind of on the margins and are reasonably vulnerable and may not have the awareness that they should pay or that they would even get a good outcome if they did pay. So that's the kind of service that it's hard to make it work commercially. You can make it sustainable as a charity, but you're unlikely to tap into that growth story that would really unlock investment, particularly because in that particular case, government could solve this by putting the onus on DWP to push benefits out more effectively, right? So there could be a really big change that makes that business model just disappear overnight, and everybody would clap and the charities themselves would cheer. And so that's really where the line is there that inefficiency or that market failure you're solving for? where it's in somebody's interest sufficiently that you have a buyer. You have a buyer for that service, and you have a buyer at scale, and that buyer understands the problem they're solving for and they're willing to pay for it. And it's that big gap between understanding the problem, willingness to pay, and ability to pay, where you kind of have that third sector intervention that's needed sometimes, or where businesses you see so many well-intentioned businesses start and they don't quite get there because they haven't found that thing that gets their buyer to stick their hand in the pocket and go, yes, I get it, I see it, and I'll pay for it.
Just maybe for you, Emily, right? Do you sometimes think about whether, if you were a nonprofit or a non-commercial company, whether the impact would be higher when I guess when you're an impact officer, what your end goal is to increase the impact as much as possible?
And I'll kind of come back to something I said at the start, which is if you want to have a big impact, you need to build a big business. And having that commercial lens and really focusing on growth helps you scale and helps you have that big impact. I don't think that it would be more impactful on a charitable model. I think having that commercial side brings something into the equation in this sort of business where you are incentivized to hit both points. You're incentivized to hit impact and sort of have that measurable outcomes for individuals, but you're also incentivized to grow and build a business that can scale. They feed each other, so you tend to do it faster, and you wouldn't necessarily attract the same talent into a charity. You wouldn't be able to afford the same rates of pay in a charity necessarily. You wouldn't have people that have that kind of real hunger for growth, but also want to feel good about that growth. And that's what we see at WageStream as people. They're commercial, they're commercially savvy. They want to build a big business, but they want to feel good about doing it. And they want to be able to go home and tell their partner or their friends or their family what great things they achieved today. And that's not just hitting a sales target, that's impacting people's lives. So I don't think that would be the right story for a company like WageStream that really has that sweet spot of something that's valuable, that people are willing to pay for, where we can achieve that scale, and also something that is measurably improving people's lives in quite a substantial way. Yeah, Emma, what do you think? Do you think WageStream should be a charity?
Absolutely not. I mean, if we look at the impact report for our fund, WageStream is by far the biggest contributor in terms of impact, simply because it has the biggest scale. The ones that come behind it are also the ones that are doing much better commercially in terms of scale, which means we're doing something right, because we're investing in those businesses where the commercial model is in lockstep with the scale of the impact. And this is where the venture model works. I mean, would you be able to do more things with vulnerable customers? I don't even think you would, because you're already using your commercial model to do more things on the platform, to add more services that then keeps the consumers engaged. No, I don't think you would.
I think the one area where maybe you would see, you might get more companies wanting to partner with WageStream. So WageStream is distributed through employers. So you might get more companies who feel like more gut feel comfortable with the idea that it's a charity rather than a commercial business. But again, the product, the proposition, kind of the technology, everything that makes it very, very successful and drives that big impact relies on the talent and the ambition of the people inside of WageStream. And I don't think that you would get an equivalent base of people operating as a charity. I can see an argument to say, well, there could be some opportunities to create more comfort, but I actually think we've created that comfort through our data and through our impact measurement. It was the early days of trying to acquire business where that was hard. And then we had the comfort of the Fair by Design investment fund and the LPs that came with that to show that people who were putting their money behind impact really believed in what WageStream was doing. And that helped unlock early client growth. So that's been a really important part of the impact story and enabling us to hit scale more quickly.
What are some of the learnings that you've had from having to measure the impact of what you're doing, and also sort of in a relationship with a VC and doing that communication between the two of you?
Yeah, I mean, we measure so much at WageStream, and we're really fortunate to have a huge amount of data, which makes life really easy. You need to measure data not for your investors, but for your clients and for your business growth. And you need to find that alignment where that data should also keep your investors happy. If you're sort of doing a box ticking job, you're not going to put your heart and soul into it. So for us, we really want to understand how we're changing people's financial lives. And we do that in a number of different ways. So one is a calculation around our impact on the poverty premium. And that is something we report to the Fair by Design Fund. And actually increasingly our other investors want to know that. But that's incredibly valuable for us to tell our clients as well, which is the impact we've had on their employee base and the amount of money we've put back into the pockets of their people. Those numbers, though, can be a little bit hard to connect with and to kind of really understand the story they're telling. So we collect a lot of data that helps us tell those stories. So we look at things like how people are saving money. So are they saving for the first time, how that's changed for them, what their feelings of stress or control are around money, how that flows through to their broader lives. Are they sleeping better? Are they having better relationships with their friends and family? Do they feel more fulfilled at work? And it's those things that really resonate, being able to collect that data and say to somebody, you know, when we roll this out to your population, we will get, let's say, 50 to 60% of your population adopting and using the tool, which is really compelling anyway. And then within that base, we'll see about 90% say that they feel less stressed. About 30% will tell us they sleep better. 60% will feel more aware of their spendings and earnings. Like, we're really changing big relationships and kind of big social factors for people that they understand. And then everything we build has to feed into that. And so we have our product governance framework that defines kind of what good looks like and what we're trying to achieve. Everything has to hit a commercial note and an impact note. So it has to do both. It has to be sustainable. So